Hi, Seth David here with another wonderful webcast brought to you by Nerd Enterprises Incorporated. Today we're talking about the QuickBooks Undeposited Funds account. We're going to demystify it for you. What is the Undeposited Funds account? I've witnessed firsthand CPAs who have been completely frustrated with this account. They don't get it, and some of them are pretty smart. Well, I've learned to break things down simply in order to get them. So perhaps that's why I'm able to teach things. I break them down simply. So here goes. The Undeposited Funds account consists of funds or money which have not yet been deposited. Pretty simple, right? The implication, of course, being that I've received the funds, I just haven't deposited them yet. So I often explain to clients that this account, whatever balance may be in there, should literally represent the check sitting on your desk which you've not yet taken to the bank. Why do we need this account? Well, when I go to the bank and I deposit several checks at once, the bank gives me a receipt for the total. This total is what shows up on my bank statement. I want QuickBooks to show me the same total in the account register in QuickBooks, especially when I go to reconcile. I don't want to sit there having to add up a group of individual checks that I've recorded in the QuickBooks side of things to figure out what adds up to the total in the bank. I want them to just match up because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to think. So, how does the Undeposited Funds account help us with this? Well, there's a good answer to that question. The Undeposited Funds account helps by allowing us to group customer payments together in a box, so to speak. And then when I go to make the deposit, I can check off exactly those payments which I'm taking to the bank today, leaving behind any payments that I may not be depositing. It's exciting stuff, really. It is. Watch it in action in the video in just a second. But first, what if your Undeposited Funds account shows a balance, but there are no checks on your desk? I don't know. Where'd the money go, right? Or maybe you're certain you've deposited the money so that it's just not recorded correctly in QuickBooks. Well, not to fear, Nerd is here. I'm going to also show you how to look at the undeposited funds based on what's showing up in the balance sheet and do some reporting that will immediately get you a concise list of just those payments that you've received that make up whatever balance is showing up there. So then you can trace them and figure out what happened. So let me blow up the screen for you so that we can get you going here. I'll share my computer screen. We'll go with second monitor so that you can see the sample QuickBooks company file that I've chosen especially for this webcast. And I've already taken the time to run a balance sheet, and we've got a balance here on the balance sheet in undeposited funds of $55,008.90. So this might raise some questions. Well, I don't have that much in checks sitting on my desk. Maybe I have a couple of checks. So how do I know what's in there? Well, one way, of course, is to go to banking and make deposits, and QuickBooks brings up the list. That's one way, of course, to see it, but the problem with this is it's not a report, and I can't get it into a report format. This is the dialog that lets me say, okay, well, maybe I'm depositing these two checks, but I don't know what happened to all these other ones. And notice here it shows me the payment subtotal. So it says, okay, this is my total that's going to show up on the bank statement. This is how I make sure that things match up. But what if I don't know what happened with these other payments? Well, what I can do is I can either complete the deposit for the ones I do know about, which is probably a good idea, so you kind of get them out of the mix. So let's just do that real quick. And again, it brings them in. Once I clicked OK, it brings them into a deposit. Now, of course, here, if I have cash or funds from a source other than a customer payment that I'm going to deposit, I simply add them in, and I say, you know, loan from shareholder, whatever it might be. And I record that. I hit save and close. So now I'm left with this $40,608.60 on the balance sheet. Let us double-click this and see what we get. Now, initially, you look at this and say, oh my God, how am I going to figure this out? But one clue is, notice there's a section here of payments with no check marks next to them. What QuickBooks does is it sort of automatically reconciles the undeposited funds account for you, because the undeposited funds account is really only going to consist of two types of transactions. You're going to receive a payment from a customer. It's going to come into undeposited funds. And then as soon as you make a deposit, you're taking payments out of undeposited funds and putting them into your bank account. QuickBooks recognizes this, and when you make that deposit, checking off a payment from that undeposited funds or payments to deposit box, then QuickBooks is going to check it off and say, okay, this transaction's closed now. So the missing check marks give you a clue that these are the ones that that are going to add up to our balance. Now, in this case, they all happen to be in a group around the same time frame, so it's simple enough, but it may not always look like that. It may be that you have some here, some up here. So the way you're going to want to get at one simple list of just those payments in the undeposited funds account, which have not been shown through in a deposit, is as follows. You're going to click Modify Report, which is here at the top left. Go to Filters. And then what we want to do is we want to look for the cleared status here in our filter list over here. There's the cleared, and we want to look at the ones that have a cleared status of no. Click OK, and there's our list. And of course, this comes exactly to our total on the balance sheet of $40,608.60. So now we know these are the payments that haven't been shown through. Now, why would this happen? Why would I have a payment in undeposited funds that I know I've deposited, and yet it's still sitting here in QuickBooks in undeposited funds? And especially since I may very well have reconciled the bank account and not had a difference there. I can tell you what almost always explains this exact phenomenon. Usually when I see this happening, what it means is I recorded the payment from the customer, I left it in undeposited funds, and then I went and made the deposit and maybe didn't even record the deposit in QuickBooks yet. Then I went to reconcile the account, and I noticed the deposit was missing. And then what I did was I recorded the deposit, and I just booked in the deposit screen. I'll make a deposit. I ignored this, and I booked the amount directly to some income account. Let's go to an income account here. I'll just pick one. We'll call it software sales. And let me go back to my payments for a minute, just to pick an example. Let's say it's $7803.20. $7803.20. And save and close. And save and close again. Register the first time. What I just did was I doubled my income, and I also inflated the assets on my balance sheet. Because when I received this payment of $7803.20, it was tied into an invoice. I can click my history button to see where that invoice was. When I recorded this invoice, I showed income of $7803.20 based on all the stuff I billed for. So that was one place I recognized income. Then I just went and recorded a deposit, booking the $7803.20 directly to an income account. So there again, I've recognized the same income twice. And why it's inflated on the balance sheet is because I showed the deposit in the bank, so the money went into the bank, and it's also the same $7803.20 is sitting here in undeposited funds. So it's showing up twice in my assets and twice in my income. So I've got an overstated P&L. My income's overstated, which means my net income is overstated, and my assets are overstated on my balance sheet. So this kind of thing is something, believe it or not, that I see fairly often, and this is a good way to uncover, discover, and discard those mistakes, because obviously then what I would do in a case like this, if I found out that that's what happened, is I would search out the $7803.20, and here it is. There's my deposit that I booked directly to software sales. What I do now is I click my payments button, and that brings up my payments to deposit. I check off my $7803.20. I see I've got a perfect match. I'm replacing one for the other. Now I go to Edit, Delete Line, and now what I'm doing is I'm ending up with one new deposit for the $7803.20, but this time it's going to take it out of the undeposited funds account, clearing out that transaction, and getting us back into balance so that, notice, it's now gone from the undeposited funds, just to prove that I've got no tricks up my sleeve. It doesn't show up in here anymore. It doesn't show up on the report, because it's not there. It's been closed out. It's been taken out of undeposited funds and put into the bank account. And that, my friends, is what the undeposited funds account is all about. I happen to think it's a great tool. It really helps to be able to group things so that I can make sure that in QuickBooks, what I'm doing mirrors exactly what happened in real life. IRL, in real life, like they do it in the text messaging world. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I do hope that you enjoyed this webcast, and I hope that you understand a little something more about the undeposited funds account. I look forward to seeing you on the web.